You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with Steve Richards and Salma Shah. They'll be with us right through until midnight. They're smiling now. Let's hope they will still be smiling at that late hour. So let's see what's coming up on the front of those newspapers for you now. The Daily Telegraph reports that 32 million Britons will be offered booster COVID vaccines at the start of next month in the hope of completing the rollout by Christmas. Pay for your own heart op, writes the Daily Mail. The paper says growing numbers of patients are paying for life-saving surgery because of NHS waiting lists. Eurostar Tyrone Mings covers the front of The Sun as he talks about the personal mental health problems he faced during the tournament. The Times reports Tory backbenchers and the travel industry are pushing back against travel restrictions. The Financial Times reports signs of housing fever as the pandemic pushes up prices. And the Metro focuses on Team GB's Olympic success, featuring pictures of BMX star Charlotte Worthington and gymnastics champion Max Whitlock. Steve and Salma with me now to take us through those newspapers. Good evening to you both. Let's start with the Daily Telegraph and their front page there. The headline, booster shots for 32 million begin next month. These are booster shots of the vaccine for COVID-19. But at the same time, we're also aware that the government is desperately trying to get younger people to even have the first shot. Steve?
Yeah, you feel this is a sort of, again, a moment on a kind of hinge in this never-ending COVID drama. On the upbeat side, I think it is encouraging and sensible to prepare for these booster jabs. And it does show the degree to which, rightly, the government sees the vaccines as the way through this, the sort of liberating path, if you like, and that therefore the booster jab will be something I think largely taken up, because I think in the Telegraph it says they're going to target the over 50s. So that's one side. But as you say, there's still the ongoing situation of younger people not taking up the jab, different motives being talked about to encourage them to get second vaccines or first vaccines. So you've got two different threads here. How are you going to make sure that by September most of the UK is vaccinated? And then what are you going to do to make sure the protections continue into the next really testing phase of the autumn and the winter? And we know it's a testing phase because we all lived through it last year.
Yes, indeed. And Salma, the article is confirming that it's all adults aged 50 and over, as well as the immunosuppressed. They'll be offered the booster jabs, and that could start as soon as September the 6th. But it just seems as though this will be a different rollout, because it's mentioning that 2,000 pharmacies will be involved. So it doesn't seem as though they're going to have the mass centres that we've had for the first and second jab.
No, and I think this is interesting because what it means is that the government is actually establishing a much more permanent way of actually bringing vaccines out on a mass scale in the same way that you would do with the flu vaccination. And I think that was always supposed to be part of the government's plan. So I actually find that quite reassuring, that this is what's going to happen, and you can walk into your pharmacy because the infrastructure is there to be able to get the COVID vaccination in the same way that you would any other. I also think that, time is really of the essence here. And if the government's still struggling to get, younger people vaccinated, then they're right to try and focus on those people who are going to be vulnerable over the winter period. Because, as Steve said, we all remember what this was like last year. And even though there's positive tones at the moment around infection numbers, we cannot risk, going backwards on this. So it's quite reassuring.
Steve, take us to the Daily Mail and their front page. At first reading of this headline, it does seem quite shocking. Pay for your own heart op.
Well, this is the other side of the COVID coin, the waiting lists that have grown, not just COVID, but the tendency to underfund the NHS compared with other equivalent countries and their health provision. The combination of the two means there are these epic waiting lists for non-COVID treatments. So what do? Now, according to the Mail, those with the money are throwing money at the situation. and spending a fortune on things like heart ops. So the headline, it's not a sort of new government policy, go out and pay for your own heart op, but it's a consequence of the huge demand and the lack of capacity. And I think the kind of lack of capacity issue, the long waiting lists, is going to become a growing political issue over the autumn and into next year, because to meet it will involve inevitably substantial increases in resources and staff, and it's not at all clear that they will be in place quickly enough to address it, hence the front page in the Mail tomorrow.
Yes, and Salma, those without the financial means will be at a real disadvantage, with a heart operation costing, according to the Mail on average, there, £20,000.
I mean, hugely. And I don't think the suggestion is that it's just people who can afford it. I think it's people who are desperate. And that's the reason why there is this surge in private treatment. I think the issue here, again, just to go back to the question of booster jabs and coming out of restrictions, is exactly this, that we have this huge problem that is occurring with waiting lists that is not COVID related. And I think the Department for Health is trying now to message us in a way to ensure that we don't think of this as the National COVID Service and that we think of it as the National Health Service again. And I think that's very important for people to understand that they actually can come forward with other illnesses in a way that during, the height of the pandemic, they were told to stay away. So I hope that, the Department for Health sort of thinks about how they're messaging this stuff as well.
Let's move on to talk about holidays. Everyone's thinking, can they take them? Where can they go? If they go, will rules be changed while they're away? We've only really got sort of August, really, of the proper holiday season. But it seems as if backbench Tories and actually cabinet ministers, Rishi Sunak, one has been mentioned, are really putting a lot of pressure on the Prime Minister to change his tact on the travel situation. Steve?
Well, he's probably putting pressure on himself, because he's inclined to open up whenever there's a debate about this. He's on the opening up side. It does seem weird that on one level, the UK, or certainly England, compared to quite a few countries, sort of opened up, in inverted commas, a couple of Mondays ago, and yet its travel restrictions compared to some European countries, for example, are still pretty strict. There's a sort of odd mismatch there. Now, I think there's a debate about whether they opened up too much within England, to take the example of the Westminster-based government, too quickly and too early. But given that they did, it does seem weird that travel restrictions are still pretty constrained. I suspect there will be quite an opening up in the coming days on that front.
But one of the issues is that it's just so complex. We're talking about this new Amber watch list now, or Amber Plus, as some people have dubbed it. It's just incredibly complicated for people, isn't it, Salma?
Well, not only is it incredibly complicated, but you actually can't plan for anything with this system, because, I had a holiday booked to France and all of a sudden it went on Amber Plus Plus. So I ended that holiday, and then Spain looked like it was going to be safe. So we were thinking about booking Spain, but that looks like it's going to go into the Amber Plus Plus system. And I think the difficulty here is that there isn't any clear communication about what is prompting certain countries to go on certain lists. And I think we had the Foreign Secretary saying something that was then corrected about, the island of Reunion being the reason that France is on the Amber Plus Plus list, and whether there was a variant of concern in the country. So I actually don't understand the logic behind some of these decisions. So I think that is the other complication to this, is that nobody can actually plan anything.
No.
The whole traffic light system is in sort of chaos. If you remember, at the beginning, those on the so-called amber list were not meant to be even considered for holidays or anything else. It was for kind of urgent work-related travel. Well, now amber, August, people go, oh, amber list, yeah, that might be possible. So the whole thing lacks clarity and consistency and coherence. And obviously, as you said at the beginning, this is August the 1st. We're in the key month now. Yeah. This is when it really applies.
Let's have a look at the FT to start with in this section. And this is a story about property prices surging because of the pandemic. How so, Steve?
Well, the demand continues to outstrip supply in so many key areas. And you have this problem whereby as property prices soar in kind of cities around large parts of the world, actually, kind of essential workers, for example, required for the pandemic, find it increasingly difficult to rent or buy in cities in particular, as just one example. And I think the issue of housing, it's going to be a huge issue in the UK, it already is going to be, I think it's going to intensify here and in other parts of certainly the Western world in the coming years as well.
Yes, and the article saying fastest US growth in 30 years. It is a global phenomenon that they describe, Salma.
Yeah, it's a global phenomenon because obviously we've all felt the pandemic and we've all gone through lockdown. I think what's interesting is, the UK is in a unique position as well because, like other countries, it sort of modified, economic stimulus, and one of those was stamp duty in this country. And so I think that there are things that the government has done that's actually boosted this, which in short term makes sense to try and stimulate the housing market when you think it's going to stagnate. But it's going to remain to be seen as to whether that was the right thing to do and the right stimulus to offer at the time. Because if we're going to see inflating prices, either we're going to see a bubble or we're going to see a long period where people are going to be, again, locked out of buying homes and the affordability will become a lot more difficult.
Steve, let's have a look at the Sun. And this is the story of Tyrone Mings talking about his mental health struggle during the Euros, being very honest about what he was going through.
Yeah, I mean, I've only seen the front page headline, but isn't it interesting that now so many sporting stars, it's been a running theme of the Olympics, not only feel the need to talk about mental health pressures with the kind of high profile, the competitive pressures and all the rest of it, not only feel the need, but kind of do it in a way that makes front page headlines. And on the whole, though I have some reservations, it's a wholly positive thing. Because if these glamorous sports people are doing it, it absolutely breaks the taboo. And, it wasn't that long ago when very few were talking about mental health issues. And now you're getting these kind of superstars doing it. So it is good, but there are many other levels to it. It raises issues about the pressure put upon these relatively young people and whether the preparations are given to them to cope with it and all the rest of it.
Indeed.
So I haven't read the details of this, but here we have another example following the Olympics and
it does raise a number of other issues, as you say, with Naomi Osaka and Simone Biles as well, those coming forward, and happy to discuss the issues. Thank you both. We shall see you again at 11:30.